Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I want to talk about how and when I got back into the Pokemon hobby. Now, I think it's important as this channel grows, you should understand me a little bit more as a person. Why do I collect the way I collect? What's my background? And honestly, I haven't really been transparent with you guys on any of that stuff. And I think a lot of that is me just trying to keep my personal life very separate from my YouTube channel. But like I said, I think it's very important that you at least understand me a little bit as a person more than just a voice behind the microphone all the time with, zero backstory at all. So I'm going to explain to you guys a little bit more about me. Is there going to be Pokemon content in this video? Yes, of course there will be. I'm definitely going to talk a lot about Pokemon, talk a lot about collecting, talk about a lot of the things I went through when I first got back into the hobby and a lot of my mindset. But with that said, this video is going to be very, oriented around me as a person. So if you're not really into, quite these type of videos, this might not be a video for you. But if you are curious, like, what is my backstory, then I think you should enjoy this video. Now, to preface this, I don't have, like, an absolutely crazy life. Like, nobody's going to write a book about my life. But with that said, all the experience that I've gone through, has gotten me to the point where I am right now. So I guess growing up or becoming a collector or becoming an investor, everybody in their life needs that big catalyst or that big person to help lead you in the right trajectory for your collecting hobby. And for me, that person was my mother. Our family business growing up was we had both a laundromat and then on the other side was a dry cleaners. So on the laundromat side, once in a while you would get like silver quarters in the washing machine. And at the end of the day, when my mom would count the money, I would be in the office with her because at the time I was very young. And, as she was counting the quarters, if you guys are familiar with silver money, like it's a extremely distinctive sound. So anytime she'd be counting quarters and you would hear a silver quarter hit that pile in her hand as she was counting, $10 worth of quarters, it would make that very super distinctive silver sound. And so at a very, very young age, my mom was able to really express to me like the importance of like valuable coins. So that's probably the very, very baseline of me as a collector was collecting coins and collecting currencies, because anytime you run a cash business, once in a while my mom would get older bills that would come through, and whether or not a silver certificate would slip through or just older bills. And keep in mind, at the time when I was younger, none of the new money had come out yet. It started with like the new $20 bills, and now we're 50s and 10s and hundreds, and all these different bills are the new Federal Reserve note style. But as I was younger, they all looked alike. But unless you were able to quickly identify stuff, star notes, stuff like this. So because my mom was very big into collecting money, that was just the natural progression. But once, that was the start point. But at the time, I also, was very understanding of like condition and, uncirculated versus circulated. And my mom really at a super, super young age, like pushed that in me and really like made that the foundation. So really to understand condition led me to where I am now, where condition is so important when it comes to Pokemon cards. And when I was younger, the first thing that I really started collecting myself was sports cards. And not only was it sports cards, but for whatever reason, my favorite player growing up was Nolan Ryan. So that's the only card I really wanted to collect. And so I always just wanted Nolan Ryan cards. So I had, at the time, just one of every single Nolan Ryan card that was out there, with the exception of like, some of his rookie year stuff, which as I got older, I did get a Nolan Ryan rookie many years ago. So I was able to knock that off my list. But for whatever reason, that was just a player I collected. But it was definitely part of like that real, true early 90s, late 80s junk wax era. When I'm telling you, like, zero rarity, zero scarcity to cards, that was the time that I was collecting. But even at the time, I really understood like the condition of cards and why keeping your cards were important. And getting like my very first top loaders and just throwing cards into top loaders. I wasn't at the point yet where I was penny sleeving anything and put it into top loaders, but I at least understood that very basic foundation. And then in like 1993, I remember I was really big into Marvel cards, and they had the Marvel cards that if you put them together, they made like an image. And if you had, like the 9 card sheets, like your binder sheets, you can make like an image of it. And I was super into those growing up. And then, as anything happens, eventually Pokemon became a thing, and I was into Pokemon, I would say, pretty early on, because I know a lot of the early cards I got were a lot of the shadowless stuff. So, and the only reason I know that is because when I went back years later and looked through all my cards, I realized how many shadowless cards I actually owned. So the only way was that I just happened to be in very early on that initial Pokemon print run. And then, like anybody else, I just got old. I grew out of Pokemon cards, because for me, like 1999 was right around 5th grade, and for the elementary school I went to, it was only 1st through 5th. So after 5th, yeah, you go to middle school, and 6th, 7th, and then, or sorry, for my middle school it was 6th, 7th, 8th, and in middle school your priorities are changing a lot. So it wasn't really like Pokemon for me. So pretty much for me, my Pokemon collecting hobby as a kid was base set. I was super into jungle, a little bit into fossil, and like almost nothing for Team Rocket. So that was it for me. And then it took me all the way into 2012 to get back into the hobby. So I graduated college in December 2011. I got a degree in geoscience. So with a degree in geoscience, you could do one or two things. You could just be a geologist, or you can go and make a lot of money. So for me at the time, right out of college, I had nothing keeping me at home. I had no responsibilities. I was just a young kid with some college debt, wanted to make a bunch of money. So I applied to every single oil field job that I could find. And then eventually, come June 2012, I got hired on as a petroleum engineer working for a pretty large oil field service provider. And at the time, I'd moved out to North Dakota. I didn't bring much with me. I loaded up. At the time, I had just a little, like a older Explorer. I loaded up the back with everything that I was going to bring with me, and I left all my stuff from growing up at home at my mom's house. Because keep in mind, I'd at this point only 6 months out of college. And after I started working a little bit, I started making a bunch of money. And I was able to get rid of all my debt. And not only was I making a lot of money, I was living at what they call man camps. And what a man camp is in the oil field, it's just pretty much like company housing, because where I was, it was like a boom town, so there wasn't a ton of available housing, and the housing that was available was super expensive. So I was able to work, eat, and live for free. So all I was doing was just banking a ton of money. But because you're also in an oil boom town and there's nothing really around you to do, I had 0 friends in the town I was. Yeah, you start to become friends with the people you're working with, because the people you're working with are also in very similar situations, that nobody where I was working was from there. So everybody was from different spots. So yeah, you made your friends that way. But, at night and on the weekends or whatever days you weren't working, honestly, I was just bored. So what's the one thing you start to do when you're bored? You just start to buy stuff. And at the time, Amazon wasn't anything like it is today. So it wasn't like I could just go and, one click buy on Amazon all I wanted. What I would do is I would just go on eBay and I would just start searching for stuff. And, the things that I started buying were just things from my childhood. The first things I really got into was currencies, like some of the really old currencies that I didn't really experience growing up, because like I explained to you, a lot of the reserve notes that were part of my collection were reserve notes that people would use at my mom's laundromats that they would pay to pick up their clothes and stuff. So yeah, those currencies were old-ish, you know, a lot of majority of my collection was from like the 1960s. Once in a while you get some older notes from like 1934. Those were like all my $10 bills for whatever reason. And then yeah, like I said, some of those older $1 bills, but they were all of that style. So the first thing I really wanted to start doing was buying like these super old bills, you know, like they're like horseback notes. They're the, you know, extra large ones. They have different presidents on them than you're normally used to. Those were like the first things I started getting into. And that was the first time I really started like realizing graded currency, because as I was searching through eBay, I started getting familiar with like the grading process, and maybe not so much the process, but really understanding like the importance of condition, because I could see very clearly the prices of these different bills at higher grades. And so me being who I am, and my strategy hasn't really changed now, in my head I was like, oh, I could buy a bunch of these bills raw and turn around and grade them. Keeping in mind, I've never graded a currency bill in my entire life, so I didn't know how the process worked at all or anything like that. Or honestly, I didn't even know which company was a good company opposed to which company was a bad company. I just knew how much, you know, graded bills were selling opposed to raw. So then I just started picking up some of those things. And I was buying all kinds of weird stuff. And then I was buying like movie posters. And I started buying like vintage movie posters. And then I would go out and spend, you know, $25, $30 on a movie frame poster. And then I had like this weird movie poster collection. And then growing up, I had one chase card for Pokemon that I never got. And that one chase card for me personally was just a base set Raichu. And if you guys are familiar with this channel, you've seen that I have a pretty large base set Raichu collection through varying conditions. And it's still one of my collection goals that I have not met, is I've been trying to complete a Raichu graded collection from 1 all the way up to 10, but including all subgrades. And not only am I trying to complete that collection, more importantly, I'm trying to complete that collection by grading cards myself. And that's the huge difference. If I wanted to just go out and pick up a bunch of graded copies of Raichus through various conditions, various grades, I can probably do that relatively recently, or sorry, not relatively recently, relatively easily, because, you know, a lot of the cards that I'm missing are at those low grades, so the dollar amount would be very minimal. But that would take away like the chase for me. But anyways, growing up, I always wanted a base set Raichu, and I was very lucky growing up. I was able to pull a Charizard, a Blastoise, a Venusaur, you know, you name it, I pulled it as a kid. But for whatever reason, the Raichu just eluded me. And I even remember growing up just wanting a Zap deck. And if you guys remember, Zap decks, it's just one of the theme decks. And I wanted a Zap deck so bad because I thought there was a Raichu in it. But it ended up being a Mewtwo. But I thought the Raichu was going to be in there, and I wanted that deck so bad, and then I finally got it. And I brought it home, and I realized there's a freaking Mewtwo in it. And I remember just being crushed. But, you know, that was a card I wanted. And I had one friend that I knew had it. And I remember we were upstairs in his room. He had his Pokemon card binder out. I had my binder out. And I wanted to trade him for his Raichu. And I probably offered him every card I had and the kitchen sink. And I think at a point, whenever you, as somebody that owns a card that is not maybe super valuable, but the second you realize that somebody is equating some kind of extreme value to a card you have, and then that person is super passionate and wants that card, you're almost now de-incentivized to want to trade that card away, and you don't want to give it to the person. And my friend, I still to this day just believe that he saw that true passion, that true want in my eye for that Raichu. So he would not trade it. And I want to say I offered him like, I don't remember if this is 100% sure, but I'm like 99% that I think I offered to trade him my Charizard for that Raichu, and I'm pretty sure he told me no. So that memory has always stuck with me. Just because he knew how bad I wanted it, he would not trade it. And I never got a chance to get a Raichu. And for whatever reason, by the time I stopped collecting, that huge, missing area of my collection was never fulfilled. So, you know, back now we fast forward to 2012, and I'm buying stuff on eBay, and as anybody, as you're buying stuff on eBay, you always flock to things you know. So I started looking up Pokemon cards one day, and it was strictly out of the blue. There was no catalyst. There wasn't like I had some kind of, like aha moment, and the world and the moons and the stars, everything aligned. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like this, amazing thing in my life where now it's an amazing thing, and to think back on it like it's special, but at the time it wasn't. And I just started, the first card I started looking up was base set Raichu, because that was the one card, like I said, that always eluded me. And keep in mind, when I had gone to North Dakota and I loaded up my Explorer and I only brought like clothes and pretty much nothing else, I didn't have, like my shoebox full of Pokemon cards growing up. Like that wasn't one of the necessities I decided to bring with me. So as I was going through eBay, like there was at the time just a flood of base set Raichus that I could pick up. And, at the time, I honestly, I wish I could tell you like that I was like, oh, I just picked up a crazy amount of first edition base set Raichus because it was, end of 2012 and they were worthless. This is the part of the story that's not like amazing, because I didn't do that. I just picked up every single Raichu that I could find on eBay. I didn't care. And at the time, I don't even know if I really knew the difference between unlimited, shadowless, and base set. I was just buying them. And, back then, I'm sure there was, nobody really keeping, like a good track of the Pokemon market. But I want to say that honestly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I really do believe that for a short period at the end of 2012, that I single-handedly like swayed the Pokemon market by buying out the Raichus. And by doing that was like just the catalyst. And as I started buying Raichus, I more or less like bought up the entire market. And I don't even want to say like I was buying Raichus for cheap. I want to say like I was picking up some of them for like $9, which at the time you could probably have bought a handful of Raichus. But I was like spending like $9 on them just because for me, who at the time I was making decent amount of money, like right out of school, I was just buying them. And I wasn't really buying them so much to have them as an investment or anything. I was just buying them because I was wanting them. And I was paying whatever dollar amount I wanted. Like, I know from all the way I talk on this channel, always trying to explain to you guys, like, find the best deal. I wasn't doing that when I first got into the hobby. I just, like I said, just kept buying them and buying them. But as I was buying them, I started buying them in lots. But as I was buying them in other lots, there would be other cards in there. And then that was the first when I really started to like now dive a little bit deeper, and I would get in. And then I started realizing like, okay, there is a value to this card, and I'm overpaying for some of these cards when I could just obviously pick up a lot of these cards much cheaper. And then one of the ways I could pick them up cheaper, like I said, was in those lots of other cards. So then I started getting familiar with like the eBay bidding process and where I was. And keep in mind, this is 2012. It's not going back like a crazy amount of time. But where I was living at the man camp, the internet there was not perfect. So, and it's any of you guys understand like sniping eBay bids for auctions, you really want to try to get your bid in on that last second. And yeah, now when we do it on our phones, we could almost wait to the last half a second. Like that's how quick internet speeds are right now. But back then, I remember having to time my last bid like 4, 5 seconds before the auction would end because it literally took me that long for that bid to go through. It was like a 4 or 5 second window just to get that last bid in. And when I say like there was crazy bidding action at the end of these auctions, it was honestly probably just me or maybe me and one other person back then. But it always just seemed like, there's this crazy bidding and nothing's really changed for eBay. There's still crazy bidding at the end. But anyways, so as I would buy these lots, as I started to realize the market, I realized, I can buy these bigger lots and just sell like 1 or 2 cards in it and pretty much pay for my Raichu for free or pay for like the rest of the cards for free. So the very first thing I really got into was buying lots that had Charizards in it. And no, I wasn't buying lots that had Shadowless Charizards or buying lots that had first edition Charizards. I wish I was, but I wasn't. I was just buying any lot that had a Charizard, whether that was a Blaine's Charizard or a Rocket's Charizard or a base set Charizard. Those were just the cards that I was buying. And I would take, and then, so I shouldn't even say I was selling yet because I wasn't. I was still at this time only really buying. I hadn't started selling, but I had already started buying with the intention of selling, if that makes sense. I know that's weird. So, as I started buying, and I think a lot of the reason that Pokemon for me was, I was very attracted to it, was because, one, I could like get a package in the mail every day. And the funny thing is where I was living in North Dakota at the time at the man camp, we didn't get our mail sent to the man camp. We had to have our mail sent to our main office address, like the place we would go to every day to work. Like that's where all my mail would get delivered. And when they talk to you about Big Brother being a real thing, listen, Big Brother's a real thing. Like junk mail would get sent there, like you name it. I don't know how the people know where you are, but they know. And like, so all our mail would get sent there. And it wasn't just mine. It was literally like every person that lived in that man camp would have their mail sent to our main office. So the girl at the front desk, like every day, the post office would just give her like, not just a couple envelopes. They would give her like a bundle, or they would give her like one of those US postal boxes just filled with other people's mail. And so, keep in mind, I was bored at the time. Like, yeah, we were working, but when you weren't working, you weren't doing anything. So I just get my packages in the mail every day and I bring them home. And I think I liked Pokemon cards too, was because I only had my room at the man camp. I didn't have to share my room. I was lucky. It was just mine. But Pokemon cards didn't take up a lot of room. You think about how many cards you can fit in like a long box or just any box, really. So then I started to accumulate all these cards with the intentions of selling them all, but I hadn't started yet. So as I was watching the market, you start to get familiar with the market and you start to get familiar with the prices that cards are selling with at that period of time. And again, when I told you guys, like, this story isn't going to be, like, absolutely amazing, like, where I could write a book, I wish I could tell you that I was buying, like, trophy cards at the time. And, super obscure cards that now are super high-end, super expensive. but I didn't. I was a little familiar with trophy cards. I wasn't familiar with trophy cards in the sense that I really knew like the individual events that they came from. All I kind of knew was that, what they were. But the reason I never wanted trophy cards, because at the time I felt that because I personally was not the person that won that trophy card, I always thought it would be very weird for me to own it. And that was the only reason I didn't buy trophy cards, was because like I honestly was so separated from, what the card like scarcity and rarity was versus just like my thought process of why would I want to own something that I didn't deserve. I would have thought about it like literally owning like an actual trophy, but like you didn't win that trophy, somebody else won it, but you're going to put it up on your mantle. Like, so that was my thought process back then. So that's why I never really owned a bunch of those cards. And in fact, I didn't own any of those cards back then. And, sure, fast forward to now, you look at the prices of trophy cards and everything. Do I wish I bought a bunch of those? Yeah, of course. But I didn't. So then, some time went by and I started to amass like a collection all over again. And the first thing I did was, really collect all the cards that I was familiar with. And all those cards I was familiar with is base set, jungle, fossil, a little bit of Team Rocket. And like I've explained to you guys in other videos, when I talk about like people getting back into the hobby, when I say a lot of people are going to always want to go back and collect what they know first. And yeah, maybe they could still go after modern because modern's fun. You could open stuff. But I always believe people will go back to what they know first. And the reason I say that is because that was what I went back to first. And then I finally started listing some cards on eBay. And I started, doing exactly what I thought I was going to do. And that was list Charizards. And I was able to sell Charizards. And it was paying for all the cards that I was buying. Now, were they selling for like crazy amounts? No. Did I really even need the money at the time? No. But why did I do it? Because it was just something to keep me busy. And I remember just being super excited when an item would sell, just so I could like go to the post office. Yeah, and this is something you're going to laugh at, but, going back then, I remember spending just a crazy amount on shipping supplies. Like now, I could go get all my bubble envelope mailers from Amazon. I have penny sleeves and card savers, and you name it. I have more shipping supplies. But I remember like finding out how much bubble mailers were, and I was going to like the local gas station and buying them and spending like $5 for 3 of them. Just the most, looking back at how much I was spending on shipping supplies is like, it makes you just like, rethink everything you've ever heard me say. But honestly, guys, back then, I just didn't know any better. And keep in mind, this is very, very new into selling for eBay for me back then. But I was just excited about like shipping them and the way I would package them. I would, cut cardboard and I would tape it and I put the card in it and I would, put it in there, and then I just want to go to the post office and stand in line at the post office until they call me and, get in tracking. And then I would, oh my God, I would do all kinds of crazy stuff. But then, then I would like check my eBay like all the time. Like whenever I was home, just check it, like refresh it, just wanting my eBay score to go up. And, people would finally leave you like good feedback and I'd be so excited. But I was always like super hesitant to give, guys, I know this is kind of going off, but I'm just trying to explain to you like back then my thought process. And then just now, who cares, right, about feedback? Like, I'm sure all you guys have plenty of feedback, but back then I remember just being so excited about this stuff. But as anything goes, for whatever reason, I never really shook it either, because it was always exciting. Now, can I say that in 2000, end of 2012 until 2016, like, I was super into Pokemon, and I was buying real cheap booster boxes and loading up on shinies, and, you know, getting into Skyridge and all the e-readers and buying first edition packs and doing all this stuff. I wasn't. I wish I was. I wish for this video I could tell you guys that that's what I was doing, but I wasn't doing it at like a super large scale. So many of my cards that I had really were acquired, like I said, through buying lots. And I would just go on eBay anytime I was bored, and I would just type in Pokemon lot. I wouldn't type in a year. I wouldn't type in the name of a character. I would just type in Pokemon lot, and then I would just filter it to items ending soonest. And whatever item just at that moment were ending would be the items that I was watching. And yeah, occasionally you would find some good ones that you would have, like, and you would wait and you would set a timer on your phone and try to get them. But at the time, a lot of these lots were pretty decent, and they had a lot of good cards in it. So that's how I was able to acquire a huge percentage of my collection. And because a lot of those cards at the time were really considered bulk. Yeah, you always had, your hollows and everything. But even at the time, I remember thinking of like how poor some of these hollows were, like dollar amount wise. I remember like looking at lots that had a lot of these base set hollows, like Zapdos and Poliwhirl and Hitmonchan and, all the fossil hollows and a lot of the jungle fossils, and just they had no value to them. So they were all just bulk to me. Really, the only cards that I was caring about was the Charizard or Charizards, depending on the set. And really, I just wanted those Raichus. And a lot of the sets I would go after would just have like one or two Raichus, so I would just buy them all. And that was how a lot of my collection was built. And yeah, looking back on it, there were some really, really good cards that were included in a lot of these lots that at the time I probably didn't even know. And I wish I understood gold stars like back then the way I do now, because I probably could have picked up a way more gold stars than I have now, and it would have been just an amazing investment for my future. But like you don't know this stuff. And when I tell you guys I was buying cards back then and buying lots, I wasn't doing it with like this intention that someday these cards will make me, like wealthy or rich or help pay off my house or do anything like crazy. There was a time where I started getting like picky about the lots that I was buying because they had too many cards in it. Yes, you heard what I said right. The lots that I was buying had too many cards in it. Like, to say those words and have them come out just shows you like how low the value was on a lot of those cards, that these bulk cards were starting to take up too much room. And God, I just started accumulating more and more cards, and eventually like my collecting goals changed. And then I would say in really 2016, with Pokemon Go happening and the hype that surrounded it, like I really got into a lot of like the more modern stuff. And this is when I really started looking at like XY and really like following a lot of this stuff. And Evolutions, I remember Evolutions when it came out, just being super excited, like, wow, Evolutions, like these are all the cards that I love, and then Evolutions just being like a hot set. And I don't really remember like Generations at all. I remember Generations like having a little bit of hype around it, but the way, all right, and then this is weird too, because the way I remember Generations is very different than the way a lot of people talk about Generations. A lot of people talk about Generations like when it first came out, it was super popular and packs were selling for like crazy amounts of money and everybody was getting into Generations, and then Generations prices collapsed. I don't remember all that hype at the beginning. But then again, I probably wasn't like as focused into Generations as maybe some other people were. I don't remember Generations not being readily available everywhere. But I've heard a lot of people like describe that, but that doesn't, I guess now we're just going off on a tangent a little bit. And then, fast forward to where we are now, and, just being able to collect throughout all this time. And that's why when I tell you guys, a lot of this hobby isn't about like buying products with the sole intention of getting, super rich. And don't get me wrong, my collecting from where I was at the end of 2012 to where I am now, with my thought process, how I feel about sealed product, how I feel about vintage sealed product, how I feel about vintage, how I feel about how I feel about Wizard of the Coast versus the Nintendo stuff versus Diamond and Pearl versus all the Heart Gold Soul Silver stuff versus the black and white stuff versus XY versus Sun and Moon versus Sword and Shield. My thought process for all these things and sealed product and individual cards and rarity versus scarcity has changed so drastically. But I just want to like give you guys an understanding of like where I come from. What's my backstory? And like I said, I wish my backstory was, a little more flashy. And honestly, guys, probably at this point in the video, I probably have like one person listening. And if they're listening, it's because they can't figure out how to shut off this video. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to give you guys a little story about me, because I do believe it's important to give context, because I don't want, when I make videos and I explain to you guys like my investment strategies and my thought process, I don't want it to come off as like bragging all the time, where it's just like, oh, I know everything there is to know about Pokemon, like I put all this time in, and every single purchase I've ever made in my life has just been like this super calculated thing, and I've been in the hobby so long that I just have like a crazy amount of first edition Charizards and all this. And it's not like that. But a lot of it, like I said, is just time in the hobby. And through my time in the hobby and buying a lot of lots, and that was my bread and butter, and really even to this day, that's my bread and butter, is just buying Pokemon lots with a lot of cards in it. And through that time in the hobby, I got really lucky. And a lot of that, like I said, is because a lot of those bulk cards from when I really started getting into the hobby, I just got super lucky that all those cards increased in value. And there was some, real good gems in some of these. And you want to call it luck, maybe call it luck. But is it lucky when I was still buying those lots with an intention for them to be collectible, for them to be investable in the future? Now, did I think it would, every single card from base set graded was going to be worth what they are? And I didn't even talk about like grade and stuff, but maybe that would be a different video. I could probably think of a few things that I probably should have mentioned in this video, but I just wanted to give you guys like the baseline. But hey, listen guys, if you're new to this channel, and I'm just going to tell you right now, if you made it to the end of this video, you should have been subscribed, because I don't know how anybody could listen to me just ramble like a moron for all this time. But other than that, do me a favor, go down below, hit the like button. But you could also write a comment too. Let me know how did you get back into the hobby? Did you go through like any sort of mindset like I went through? And, have you been able to grow in the hobby? And has your mindset changed drastically? Very similar to the way my mindset has. But other than that, guys, I'll catch you on the next video.